I have to be honest with you. I was looking at this stack of books we're covering today, and I had this realization that was, frankly, a little embarrassing.
Oh, yeah. Do tell.
Well, just think about it. We are, the most advanced species on the planet. We've mapped the human genome. We've landed rovers on Mars. We carry the sum of human knowledge around in our pockets.
And yet,
I still went to bed at 2 a.m. last night because I just could not stop scrolling through videos I didn't even like.
the doom scroll. A true classic of the modern genre.
So it's ridiculous, right? We have all this data, all this logic,
Right.
and our behavior it refuses to get in line with what we know is good for us.
Right.
And that is exactly where we're starting this deep dive. We're looking at a curated list of readings from Michael Holsworth. He's a heavyweight behavioral scientist, author of The Hypocrisy Trap, and he has spent 20 years studying exactly this, why we do things we know we shouldn't.
And the mission, I guess, for this deep dive is to figure out why that happens. But more importantly, Holsworth gives us a toolkit. We're going to look at how to hack that little voice in your head.
The loud one.
The very loud one. And how to stop your work meetings from being a total disaster. And maybe why our obsession with calling people hypocrites is actually backfiring on all of us.
What I really appreciated right away was his honesty. You sort of expect a behavioral scientist to be this stoic, perfect decision-making machine.
Right.
But he admits right up front, he still struggles. He calls it the gap.
It's a great starting point. The gap is just the distance between your intention and your action. And Holsworth argues we struggle to bridge it because of this fundamental misunderstanding of how our brains work.
The fundamental attribution error.
Exactly, the fundamental attribution error.
Okay, let's pause right there. That's a term that gets thrown around in, Psych 101. But can we just define it for this discussion? Because I feel like people misuse it all the time.
Sure. It's the tendency to blame personality when we see someone else fail, but blame the situation when we fail ourselves.
So if you cut me off in traffic, you're a jerk. If I cut you off, it's because the sun was in my eyes and I'm late for a really important appointment.
Exactly that. We contextualize our own behavior, but we essentialize everyone else's. And Holsworth says, this is why we fail to change. We try to fix the person.
Right. Have more willpower. Be more disciplined.
But usually the problem isn't the person, it's the situation. It's the system they're operating in.
There was that really concrete example in his notes about hiring practices. I found this fascinating because it's something I think every manager does wrong.
Oh, yeah. This is the systems over willpower argument in action. Most companies hire by interviewing one person at a time, right?
Yep. You meet candidate A, have a coffee, chat for an hour. Then an hour later, you meet candidate B.
And the research shows our brains are just terrible at that. We get swayed by the most recent conversation or who made us laugh or
who wore a tie we like.
Right. So relying on your judgment in that moment is actually the trap.
So that's the fix.
The system fix is to compare candidates side by side on specific questions. It removes the need for willpower. You change the environment, the structure of the interview to get a better result. You stop trying to be a better interviewer and just build a better interview.
All right, so step one is realizing we aren't as in control as we think, and our environment dictates a lot. That brings us to the first book in the stack, Chatter by Ethan Kross. This deals with the most immediate environment we live in, which is our own heads.
This book is fantastic because it validates something we all do, but we rarely ever admit.
We talk to ourselves.
Constantly.
I think the stat was something like 4,000 words a minute to ourselves internally. That just sounds exhausting.
It's a staggering amount of processing. And Kross makes this distinction between voice and chatter. The internal voice is good.
Right. It's how you plan or remember where you left your keys.
It's a tool. Chatter is when that voice gets stuck in a negative loop. It just zooms in on a problem and spins and spins.
And this is where the advice usually gets so annoying, just let it go or be positive.
Yeah. But Kross is looking at the mechanics of the brain. He says we need distance.
Psychological distance.
Yes. When you're in that chatter mode, you're totally immersed, you're drowning, you have to pull the camera back.
The tool he suggests for this is, well, it felt a little weird when I first tried it. He says to talk to yourself in the second person.
It does feel strange to say, okay, you need to focus on this recording right now. But the research is solid.
How does it work?
When you use I, your brain activates the emotional centers, the amygdala, the stress response. But when you use your name or you, it shifts activation to the reasoning centers.
It tricks your brain into thinking you're giving advice to a friend.
And we are all so much better at fixing other people's lives than our own.
So true.
It leverages that for your own benefit. He also suggests temporal distancing,
Mental time travel.
which is really just a fancy way of asking yourself, how am I going to feel about this screw up in 1 year?
And usually the answer is, I won't even remember it happened.
Which instantly lowers the temperature, it breaks the immersion, it turns a tragedy into a data point.
Okay, so we've got a handle on the voice inside. But we don't live in isolation. We have to deal with other people, which is where things, usually go off the rails.
Definitely.
The next book is Wiser by Cass Sunstein and Reed Hasty, and this one just destroys the whole idea that two heads are better than one.
This was a painful read for anyone who spends their life in corporate meetings. The assumption is that groups average out the crazy ideas.
The wisdom of crowds and all that.
Right. But Sunstein and Hasty found the exact opposite. Groups often amplify errors. They become more extreme than the individuals.
Wait, hold on. Usually, committees are famous for being boring and risk-averse. You're saying they're actually extreme.
They can be. It all depends on the starting point. If you get a group of people who are slightly risk-averse and they talk for an hour, they will leave that room terrified of doing anything.
And if they're aggressive?
If they're slightly aggressive, they'll leave ready to go to war. The group pushes everyone toward the pole they were already leaning on.
They talk about something called information cascades. Is that just a fancy way of saying peer pressure?
It's a very specific type of peer pressure. It's about the sequence of information. Imagine a meeting starts. The first person to speak is really confident and says, we should launch Project X.
Okay.
The second person might have doubts. Maybe they have some data that says Project X is a bad idea, but they assume the first person knows something they don't, or they just don't want to rock the boat right away. So they agree.
And by the time it gets to the third person, it already feels like a consensus.
Exactly. Even if that third person knows Project X is a total disaster, the social cost of disagreeing with two people is so much higher than disagreeing with one. So the best information gets buried.
The group creates a reality that none of the individuals actually believe in.
That's it. It's terrifying.
Yeah, and it explains so many bad business decisions where you look back and think, how did nobody see this coming? So how do we break the cascade?
You have to change the structure of the meeting. The simplest rule, and one I think every single leader needs to hear, is the leader speaks last.
That requires a lot of discipline from the boss.
It does. But if the person with the most power goes first, they've signaled the correct answer. The discussion is over before it even began.
And the other tool?
They call it a private collection.
Yeah.
This is where everyone writes down their opinion before the meeting even starts.
So it anchors you to your own perspective.
Yes. It forces that diversity of opinion to survive the first wave of social pressure. If you've already written down this project is a bad idea, it's much harder to just nod along when the boss says it's great.
It seems like a recurring theme here is friction. We usually try to make everything effortless, but Holsworth seems to be saying we actually need to introduce more friction into our lives.
That's a great observation. Our intuition is to take the path of least resistance. But in complex systems, that path is often a trap. We want efficiency, but we end up with stupidity.
Which leads us perfectly to the next section, complexity. We've got two books here, Obliquity by John Kay and Critical Mass by Philip Ball. Let's start with obliquity.
This concept, it blew my mind the first time I encountered it. Kay argues that in complex systems like your life or a business or the economy, the most direct path to a goal is often the wrong one.
He uses the Panama Canal as this geographic metaphor, which I thought was really helpful.
Right. If you want to cross Panama from the Atlantic to the Pacific, your intuition says go west. But because of the curve of the isthmus, the canal actually forces you to travel east for a bit to get to the other side.
If you blindly followed your compass west, you'd just dig a hole in the ground and get nowhere.
Exactly. So how does that apply to, say, running a business?
Yeah, or just living life.
Well, think about profit. If a CEO wakes up and just screams, I want to maximize shareholder value today, they usually end up cutting costs, annoying customers, and eventually destroying the company. They're trying to go west.
But the companies that focus obliquely on making a fantastic product or treating their employees well, they often end up being the most profitable.
Exactly. Profit is the byproduct of doing something else well. It can't be pursued directly.
It's like happiness. You can't just decide to be happy. You have to go do a hobby or help a friend or learn a skill, and then happiness sort of sneaks up on you.
That is the rule of obliquity. If you aim directly at the target, you miss. You have to aim at the side.
Now, critical mass takes this complexity and applies it to crowds. This is social physics. But I have to ask, isn't treating humans like atoms a little reductive?
It is, and Holsworth adds a massive warning label here. But the analogy is useful for understanding tipping points. Philip Ball describes how a crowd moves like a fluid.
Like a traffic jam.
Yes. A highway flows like water until you add one too many cars, the critical mass, and then suddenly it freezes into a solid. It's a phase transition.
The system just snaps.
And it happens in stock markets and riots, too. Everything is fine, fine, fine.
Yeah.
Until it isn't.
But the warning label, why can't we just predict society using physics?
Because atoms don't think. A water molecule doesn't stop and say, hey, why am I boiling right now? I don't really want to boil.
But humans do.
We're reflective. If a model predicts we will do X, we might do Y just to spite the model. So social physics works for traffic, but you can't program a society like computer code.
We're too messy.
We're too messy and too judgmental.
Which brings us right to Holsworth's own book.
The Hypocrisy Trap. This one felt personal. We are living in the golden age of calling people hypocrites.
Yeah.
It is the ultimate mic drop on Twitter.
It is. And Holsworth drops a bomb here. Hypocrisy isn't a physical thing. It's not like theft or assault. It is entirely a moral judgment we manufacture. But wait a minute. If a politician says climate change is the enemy and then flies a private jet to a climate conference, that is objectively hypocritical. That's a fact.
The inconsistency is a fact. The label hypocrisy is the weapon we choose to use to punish that inconsistency. And Holsworth asks, why do we care so much?
And the answer is?
It comes down to a deep evolutionary desire for fairness. Yeah. We hate seeing someone get a free ride. We hate seeing someone play by different rules.
So what's the trap? Why shouldn't we call that politician out?
The trap is that when we scream hypocrite, we are usually trying to signal that we are virtuous. Look at him, he is bad, therefore I must be good. But we're setting a standard that we probably can't meet either.
Right, because I probably drove my car to the store when I could have walked.
Exactly. And the more we weaponize this word, the more we degrade the public discourse. If everyone is a hypocrite, then nobody is.
The word loses its power.
It loses its power to shame people into better behavior. We all just get cynical.
He talks about the principled versus pragmatic trap for leaders, which I thought explained a lot of modern politics.
It's the ultimate double bind. We tell our leaders, never compromise your values, but we also say, get things done. You cannot do both. To pass a law, you have to compromise. But the moment you do, the voters call you a hypocrite. We are effectively punishing them for doing their job.
So we're asking for the impossible and then getting angry when they can't deliver it.
And that anger turns inward. That brings us to the final and honestly the darkest book in this stack.
Yeah. On the Genealogy of Morality by Friedrich Nietzsche, this was a real curveball. We went from behavioral science to 19th century philosophy. Why is this here?
Holsworth calls this the view from the opposite end of the telescope. Nietzsche's whole argument is that everything we think is good, humility, kindness, guilt, might actually be a kind of sickness.
The internalized aggression theory really stuck with me. Can you break that down for us?
So, Nietzsche argues that humans are naturally aggressive animals. For thousands of years, we roamed around, we hunted, we fought. That was just our nature.
And then we built societies.
Exactly. We enclosed ourselves in walls. We built cities, laws, and all these rules of polite society. We domesticated ourselves.
Okay.
But that aggressive energy didn't just vanish. Nietzsche says it had to go somewhere. Since we couldn't release it outwardly by, attacking our neighbors, we turned it inwardly. We started attacking ourselves.
And that self-attack is guilt.
Yes, the conscience. That little voice that says, you are bad, you shouldn't have done that. Nietzsche argues that it's just your prehistoric aggression tearing at your own ego because it has no other target.
Wow. That is a bleak view of morality.
It is. And Holsworth is very clear. He doesn't agree with all of it. But he includes it because it forces you to question the very foundation of why we do what we do.
We assume feeling guilty means we're good people.
And Nietzsche suggests feeling guilty just means we are domesticated animals punishing ourselves.
It certainly makes you look at that voice in your head from chatter a little differently. Maybe that negative spiral isn't just anxiety. Maybe it's that internalized aggression.
It ties the entire stack together. Whether it's the voice in your head, the pressure of a meeting, or the judgment of hypocrisy, we're constantly policing ourselves and others.
So if we step back and look at this gap, this struggle to be better, to bridge the distance between who we are and who we want to be, what's the big takeaway? Are we just doomed to be irrational, aggressive hypocrites?
I don't think so. I think the takeaway is to stop trusting the obvious narrative. The obvious narrative is that you control your actions.
When really the system controls you.
The obvious narrative is that groups are smart. The truth is, they herd like sheep unless you structure them correctly. The obvious narrative is that guilt makes you moral. The truth might be much, much more complicated.
So what? Cut yourself some slack.
Cut yourself some slack and change your context. Don't rely on willpower. If you want to lose weight, don't just stare at the cake and try to be strong. Throw the cake away.
Change the system.
If you want better meetings, don't just try harder. Change the rules of who speaks when.
And maybe stop expecting everyone else to be perfect, too.
That would certainly make the world a less angry place.
I want to leave the listener with something to chew on here regarding that Nietzsche point. We spend so much energy trying to silence our inner critic or numb our guilt. But if Nietzsche is right, and that guilt is just energy that has nowhere else to go, what could you do with that energy if you stopped using it to beat yourself up? What could you build if you stopped attacking the architect?
That is a powerful question.
Thanks for guiding us through the stack.
My pleasure.
And thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next deep dive.